Hey, welcome back to another Get Geekish Podcast. I'm Bino. That's Derek over there. Oh, that was an empty chair. Now it's Derek.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. We do these podcasts as much as we can. You know, adulting and life gets in the way sometimes, but ideally we like to make this a weekly recurrence of talking about the geeky going-ons in our heads and whatnot. And we wanted to do a little throwback this week because I've got to be honest, I'm feeling a little old. I just came back from the non-Desukan anime convention and was very multiple times reminded that I'm definitely many years older than a lot of the anime fans that were there. And somebody had this conversation that really kind of struck home inside of me, that when I think of 30 years ago, I do not think of the 90s. When I think of 30 years ago, I think of like disco in the 70s. But somebody did the math for it, and they put it on like, okay, well, to a kid now, going back to 1993 is the same as when I was a kid, 13, going back to 1963. And in my mind at that time, going back to the 60s was like the prehistoric Stone Age, you know, with stone wheels and black and white TVs. And so it was a little bit of a kick in the pants there, but, you know.
Yeah, I saw a meme the other day that said if Back to the Future was, made today, he'd be going back to the 90s. And yeah. I was just like, what? I don't like that.
And I was trying to explain that to my daughter, and I had my first shall be last Mario Kart blue shell shirt. And I had the horrible realization because I'm like, oh, well, you see, honey, the problem is I don't relate with a lot of the kids here just because I'm out of touch in the sense that this T-shirt that I'm wearing is older than most of the kids here. Because I got that T-shirt when I was working at Hot Topic back in the day in 2000, 2001. And,
did you just have, I've been noticing that too. Like there's been times where I sound like my parents, and I think you just had that moment too where you're like, well, I don't relate to these kids here. I'm pretty sure my parents said something along those lines. Not necessarily I don't relate to them, but just like I don't understand them, or, there's something like this. So we're definitely getting up there.
Yeah, because we can still relate to them in certain ways. But that's I think the fun thing about all the stuff we do on here is that we talk about geeky things that everybody's into, and you can relate to somebody else because you both enjoy the same show or the same fandom, something like that. You can get with that. But the other parts of life you don't get. Like there was somebody in the cosplay contest that had some modem sounds as part of their performance, and you could tell everyone that was alive when modems was cracking up, and everyone else was like, "What's that sound? Why is it making that noise?"
Oh, man.
Yeah, it hurts a little bit. But anyway, that's the whole kickoff of this thing. We thought we'd go back and do another throwback to say, hey, what was 30 years ago, and what did we love 30 years ago? Toys. So we'll figure some of the biggest toys of 1993.
Well, and I don't think, we've kind of talked about this before. I don't think, back when our parents were our age, the market had realized how to capitalize on their nostalgia. Like there'd been some things, like they'd bring back like the howdy doody things every once in a while or something like that, where they kid me, oh yeah. But with our generation, the 80s and the 90s, that's feels like it's just coming back in full swing. Like you can go down Target now and you can see shoes. Like my wife is pointing out, I wore those shoes in the 90s. Like those are coming back. We have movies that are getting remade from our childhood. With the new Ninja Turtles, it's, granted it's a new spin-off of it, but it's still, there's a lot of, I don't know if you saw it, but there's a lot of things that in that movie that were directed towards us.
I mean, nostalgia is a commodity now. And it's like you said, when things are getting remade and re-released, it's not they're getting updated and things inspired by the late 80s, early 90s. It's literally like, oh, here's the exact same thing. When I was shopping for school supplies, they had honest-to-God Trapper Keepers you could buy at Walmart.
Yep.
Legitimate Trapper Keepers.
and Lisa Frank is coming back with stuff, and it's crazy because we'll walk down the toy aisle, which as grown men we still do because we're kids at heart, right? So
yes, almost every time there I make my way down just to see if there's something new that
yeah. But what's sad is what's cool and what's sad is like we'll walk down and like they have the He-Man toys or the Ninja Turtle toys that they made look like from the 80s and the 90s, right? And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I go to get it and I'm like, wait, how much is this? So they're definitely capitalizing on that nostalgia because I'm like, $20 for an action figure that I'm going to keep in the box.
Or you do the math like, well, if I buy 2 of them, I can open one and keep the other in the box.
Right. Well, I mean, how many times too have we been marketed, Transformers are like, oh yeah, G1 original Optimus Prime or Megatron or whatever. And we're like, oh, cool. And then we see the price tag of like $130. We're like, how can we justify that?
Yeah. I have an adult bank account and credit cards, and I still don't want to do that.
Right. Well, see, I think that's the thing is we're still smart about the nostalgia, so we're not getting into it big time. But I don't know. In '93, what 30? That was 30 years ago. I almost that hurts. 30 years ago, it was a different time.
Mm-hmm.
The Ninja Turtles were still popular.
Of course, they were. I do have a list compiled of some of the hottest Christmas toys of 1993. Some of these you remember out here. First on their list is the Talkboy from Home Alone 2, which my friend had one of those, and we used that incessantly.
My friend had one as well that we used incessantly. I didn't get my first Talkboy until we worked in radio, and we went to the world's largest garage sale, and somebody was selling one for 50 cents, and I picked it up.
The thing I didn't understand about the Talkboy, it was just a tape recorder, but it had the little microphone plastic piece that extended out about 3 inches that made it look really official.
And you could speed up and slow down.
Ooh. Let's see what else was next on their list. My list is freezing. That's fantastic. Technology is great.
Tickle Me Elmo, that was a huge thing. Remember, Christmas is you had to get. I mean, that was not really us, but
yeah, I was gonna say I was just know that I didn't ever need to Tickle Me Elmo, but the marketing for it was everywhere, and I remember making fun of it because what do you do? It's a 13-year-old kid. You see something popular that kids like, and you make fun of it, right? It was horrible. The Nerf Arrow Storm, that was on my Christmas list for a few years. I never got it.
What year was a Nerf gun not on your Christmas list? Because seriously, Nerf, they always put out popular stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that looks great. I want that. And then,
hey man, it's Nerf or nothing.
Yep. Well, I mean, how many times do we catch ourselves walking down the Nerf aisle now, and we're like, how many rounds does that shoot in 30 seconds?
Well, you get jealous now. The Nerf guns actually shoot things. The Nerf guns when we were kids, like it kind of shot a foam thing in the general direction. Now you've got like pinpoint sniper rifles. Like, oh, this Nerf gun's accurate up to 250 yards. What?
Yeah, I remember I had the, I think it was around 93, 94, somewhere in there. I had a Nerf gun that it was a gray one, and you pulled back, and it had a little laser sight on it that you could adjust with the thing, and it was supposed to be accurate. That thing never hit where the dot was. I can tell you that right now.
And you pretty much had to turn the lights off to have it bright enough to see where the laser was actually pointing. Like,
yep.
Another one was on there was the Magna-Doodle, which was that one might have been a little bit of a nostalgia take on it because that was basically a glorified Etch-a-Sketch. Only it had a little bar you could swipe across, and it would just erase everything for you.
I bought one of those for my son the other day. It was a Ninja Turtles one for $1.
Which, fine and dandy and all, but okay, we've got this whole plastic thing that we're going to pay $20-$30 for to draw shapes. Wouldn't a pencil and a piece of paper work just as good? Like,
yeah, I guess, but it's more fun I think it's more satisfying to erase it, right? Rather than waste paper.
I don't know. The satisfaction I didn't get because the only time the eraser was ever used when I'd be drawing something and somebody else would come over and wipe it off just to be a jerk. That was.
I will say I don't know if this was 93, but you reminded me of something that I've seen recently too. Is you said the Magna-Doodle? Remember the Doodle Bear?
Doodle Bear.
Where
no.
it was a bear like that. You could just draw on it and everything like that. And when you're done with it, you could just throw it in the washer and it washes it all off. I saw one of those recently. It was a different animal, but it was a doodle animal. I don't remember what it was, but I was like, that's still a thing. And so it has the washable markers where you can draw on the actual stuffed animal. And
I tell you, I never trusted the washable markers.
Fair point.
I'm sure they worked fine, but I never. You draw with a marker that says washable. Like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it, and I'm pretty sure my mom would kill me if I attempt to wash.
Remember how bad dry erase markers were? Because that was a newer thing when we were in school, and the teacher would write it up there, and you go to erase it, and it's just still stuck there. Like you could see like the faint outline. You're like,
or you get the teacher that doesn't know the difference. They have an actual permanent marker, which at the time they had those ones that looked exactly like the dry erase markers with a little metal capsule and plastic tip, and they write it like, oh, well, that will be there for it. Actually, I don't think I even started getting whiteboards until I was in middle school. Because we had chalkboards in all my elementary school.
Yeah, so did
whiteboards were new high tech. Oh, that hurts. Man, whiteboards didn't exist. Ouch. Okay, back to more toys. Okay, Matchbox. The Matchbox car wash. Remember getting that from Kmart for Christmas. That thing was rad.
With the color changing cars?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
You get a I think I still have one downstairs. An old Mustang that went from green to light green.
Yeah, I didn't have the car wash, but I definitely had some of the color changing cars, and that was another thing in the 90s too, was like the color changing stuff with mood rings and all that jazz.
Little hyper-color t-shirts.
Yeah.
It was actually just begging for inappropriate things to happen with them. And I will say that hypercolor, I had one or two that I really enjoyed, but they probably scarred me for life a little bit because as a we'll just say I was a hefty young lad. Wearing one in the summertime wasn't good because then you just had brightly colored sweat spots all over you. Sit in a chair, get up. Why's the back of your shirt a different color? Shut up. It's hypercolor. It's cool. Let's see what else we get here. I pulled up. I found one of those old nostalgia sites that has the toys catalog from Toys R Us in 1993. The front cover includes Barney. It looks like a Barbie doll. A robot that I don't recall ever seeing that had a tape player built in its stomach. A remote-controlled car, and a Sega Genesis with Sonic 2. And big at that time, too, were the Disney Clamshell VHS tapes. Back when things were legitimately locked up in the Disney vaults. In 1993, you could get Aladdin and 101 Dalmatians and Pinocchio and Beauty and the Beast and The Great Mouse Detective.
You know, I will say, like, there is... I mean, you can YouTube it now, but there's that instant trigger when you hear remember the old Disney logo sound? You know, it was just the white etched thing on the blue background and and like you're like, oh yeah, and then it's like coming soon to VHS. You're like, oh.
You can still hear those sounds. One of my favorites was the FHE intro. It was always so overbearingly loud compared to the actual video. Let's see, what else did they have in here that was in their catalog that looked exciting? Oh, they had the Game Genie. That was a big thing for systems, which...
Okay.
I always wanted a Game Genie, but I thought the Game Genie was dumb, but I always wanted one.
Here's the thing. So I always wanted one too, and then I realized it doesn't really add much to it. It was, and you know what? It was the price of a video game, if not a little bit more, and it would unlock certain things, but it didn't work with every game.
You know, the games it did work with, half of it was so finicky because you had to attach it to the end of the cartridge and put it in your system, so it would always be a little bit off, and if you tapped it or like sneezed while you're playing, it would freeze the whole thing. And
yeah, I wanted one too, just because I was like, oh, cheats. But you know, then
there were some of those games that were impossible. Like let's be honest, how many times did anybody ever actually beat Mega Man 3 without having Super Jump on?
Well, I was just even thinking like the Ninja Turtles games; those are all, you know, that beat 'em ups, but they're rough. I mean, there's just tons of things with the Game Genie that would have helped, but at the same time, I think it was more gimmicky. You know, if you just got like the Sega Genesis magazine or the Nintendo magazine, it would have cheats in the back.
Nintendo Power.
Yep.
Great magazine, by the way. Let's see. Power Wheels was still big in 1993. I was finally old enough to drive a Power Wheels, but I was too big to get a Power Wheels. Parents really fleeced me on that one.
Can you believe if you look at pictures of Power Wheels now compared to back then, a lot has changed in 30 years. For one, I'm pretty sure they're faster and the batteries last longer.
Yeah.
But two,
when we were kids, those Power Wheels top speed was like 3 miles an hour. You'd see parents like towing their kids behind on a walker. Like, but the way they advertised it, we all thought they were race cars. Like,
they're all fancy and high tech, and I'm pretty sure some of them have working radios now and everything like that. I'm like, that's...
And they're all branded too. You're like, I got a Power. Oh yeah, that's a Cadillac Escalade XLT. Like, what? Oh, you want the S model? That one's got headlights. Like, what? This is for a 4-year-old. Electronic chess was big because they just figured out how to make that work. Which I was a chess nerd as a kid, and I didn't like most electronic chess because the difference between level 1 and level 2 was unfathomable. Level 1 was the computer literally tried to make you win, and level 2 was, well, unless you're a 19,000 ranked chess master, you're never gonna have a chance against this thing.
It's just telling you, like, it's giving you the thing like, oh yeah, I could do this, and then it's like, all right, buckle up.
The handheld games, I think we talked about those before, the little Tiger handheld ones. Those were super popular. I remember going to the Kmart in Longmont, and there would be just an entire wall of those things in the electronics section, and they were so terrible.
The thing was, I think one of the reasons they were popular is because the price tag on them. They were what, like $10?
Oh, they were $18.99. They were not super cheap, but they were.
I feel like
they were cheaper. They were cheaper the cartridges because they marketed themselves against. You see these back in 1993 prices. They were $18.99, which is a little pricey for just a gimmicky, impulse buy. But you put them next to the video cartridges for, say, the Super Nintendo or Genesis, and if you found one of those for under $50, you were lucky. Because some of the games that were popular at this particular time, Star Fox, Mortal Kombat 1, Street Fighter 2, Bubsy, Yoshi's Cookie, things like that. In this particular catalog, Mortal Kombat 1 was $69.99 for the 16-bit cartridge version of Mortal Kombat.
Isn't it weird how 30 years ago Mortal Kombat 1 was in the stores, and here we are today, and Mortal Kombat 1 is coming out later this month?
Let's try something here. Let's look up $69.99 in 1993
for inflation
to today's dollars. Yes.
Also, we just had a Street Fighter release like last month or 2 months ago as well. That's
yeah, it's let's see, amount $70 in 1993. Today's dollars. In today's dollars, that would mean Mortal Kombat 1 would cost you $148.09.
Which I'm pretty sure Mortal Kombat 1 has a deluxe edition that's like over $100. So,
but you looking back as a kid, it's much easier to see. Oh, that's why Mom always said no when I wanted new video games.
I mean, the Tiger games, like, I remember my grandma got a Pitfall one, and it was the same level, just mapped different. Like, it was just the same little electronics. It was just things would move faster.
Mm-hmm.
Same. I think I had a Spider-Man one too, and it was the same thing. It was like your character could only, because with those things they were only programmed like the 3 different moves you could do, and then things would just come across the screen a little bit faster in their little designated spots.
And it wasn't reacting thing. It was literally just you had to memorize when the buttons pushed. There was no skill to it. It was literally just memory, but they made it look like it was a video game.
Yep.
Man, this is bringing back so much. I scrolled down to the Sega section of this Toys R Us catalog, and I must have been a sucker for marketing because PGA Golf didn't have, Tony La Russa Baseball didn't have, Bill Walsh College Football didn't have, but then I had X-Men, which was mine, Cool Spot, which was I had.
Dude, Cool Spot was the best.
Royal Rumble, I didn't have that one. Jurassic Park I had, Mortal Kombat I had, Streets of Rage 2 ahead, Bulls versus Blazers, Echo the Dolphin, Tiny Toon Adventures, Jungle Strike. I'm like, oh. I ended up with all those at some point.
Well, remember, too, the whole debate between, Nintendo and Sega Genesis, well, it was Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, because everybody, like, I had friends who had Mortal Kombat on the the Super Nintendo, but I had it on the Sega Genesis, and I had the blood, and they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to type in like a blood code to find it, and they didn't have the cheat. And I was like, that's weird.
Oh, and then it was also the big year for Game Gear too, which I still to this day, Game Gear blew Game Boy out of the water, except for the fact that the batteries lasted about 13 and a half minutes. Like, I want to bring this on a road trip, Mom. Can you pick up 37 AA batteries for me?
I remember at one point I convinced my parents to get the car charger, like, because you could plug it into the cigarette outlet and connect it to the thing, and that you could play that way, and it was nice. But I had to be sitting in a certain spot for it to reach.
Oh yeah, because the cords weren't very long. Man, it was a strange year for toys, because they started coming out with the action figures for other things, because up to that point, action figures hadn't been everywhere. Everyone made a show to sell action figures, but in the early 90s, they started making action figures marketed towards things that already existed. So we started seeing the Crash Test dummies and the Street Fighter ones and the X-Men ones and Batman the Animated Series, and all those kind of came out.
Yeah, because before that, the action figures were basically just like G.I. Joes and Transformers with, some He-Man stuff. But yeah, I think the 90s, with the popularity of cartoons growing, and of course the video games, I think the 90s was a huge renaissance for the video games.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when Sega Genesis came, things started to become more popular and they became more marketable, and the graphics got better, so you could definitely do more with it.
Mm-hmm.
That helped with the action figures that we'll walk down the aisles even now and look and go, oh, they made that look like from my childhood.
I know. Well, have you noticed how many of them have just found the old molds and rehashed them? Like, I think Kenner's done it with a ton of action figures. They just found old molds of toys, like, oh, we'll just make these out again, because they can make them for pennies on the dollar of what they used to. Just put the mold in, put some bad paint job, and oh, look, we re-released these toys. Like, these weren't good back then. Like, there's some pieces that give me nostalgia, and some of them I look at it like, this is an awful toy. This was awful in 1983, and you decided to remake it and put it out again. Like,
I think it's funny too. I think we've talked about this too. It's funny that we can, if we go to like a flea market something or something like that, where you see like the grab bag of toys, and like you'll pick it up and there'll be some old G.I. Joes just loosely in there, but the paint job is all like weird, and like their mouth is all off to the side.
Their eyes are painted on the side of their head.
Yep. You're like, that brings back memories. I definitely had one like that.
Yeah, you'd go to an X-ray and you'd literally like thumb through all the ones in the wall to try and find one that didn't look jacked up.
Yep. Yep.
Oh my god. It's what toy store was your go-to toy store in 1993?
Do you remember KB Toys?
Yeah, I do. That was one in the mall close to my house.
Yep. Every once in a while, we'd get to go to the mall, and I'd always want to go into KB Toys. And KB Toys was just mind-blowing, because to me, like, I never really went to Toys R Us. It was always KB Toys, and KB Toys was just like wall to wall to wall to wall to wall toys, but it wasn't like spread out like Toys R Us, so it was like, it felt even more, because everything was just so close together, and you're just like,
yeah, KB felt like they just had too many toys, and that was just how many can we fit in this store? Like, pretty sure they were a fire hazard, but
yeah, and it was very overwhelming going in there as a kid, and my grandma giving me you got $10, and then I would sit there for 20 minutes, and this isn't even an exaggeration, 20 minutes sitting there with two toys going, which one do I want?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I got to pick the right one. I still get giddy when I go places too. If I go to like a toy collector show or something like that, and you'll be thumbing through stuff, and you'll see an old action figure, and you see that KB Toys sticker, the yellow one with the little like tin soldier on the front of it. You're like, makes me feel good.
Well, it's funny too, because like once a week, during the summer, my grandma would take me and my cousin. We'd go to McDonald's for lunch, and then we'd go to Walmart afterwards. And going through the toys section at Walmart or Target or anything like that, it's a, it was good as a kid, but there's just nothing compared to like the KB Toys because like I know a lot of people are like, oh, Toys R Us is. Again, I didn't have that growing up. Like, I don't know why we didn't go to Toys R Us, probably because there wasn't one in Greeley, but there was a KB Toys in the mall, and I just remember that just going into the mall and be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, KB Toys was always my toy store, and then the Toys R Us. If we went to Boulder, it was a special occasion that we could go in and go to the big Toys R Us and wander around.
Mm-hmm.
I found the Playmates catalog of the Ninja Turtles they released in '93. I forgot '93 is already the tail end of some of the stuff that they were coming out with this because it's a bunch of the.
Is that where the weird ones came out?
Well,
like
more
the Hawaiian shirt.
They started making up a bunch of new characters. So there was Scratch, which was the little like otter that broke out of prison, and Hotspot, which was the creepy looking gremlin Dalmatian, and then they had a giraffe, and they started putting out the other sides of the ninja for the samurai versions from the movie and. Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Oh.
I still have my Samurai Raphael somewhere. But I remember I used to have like the Hawaiian shirt, Michelangelo, and what did the other tropical Donatello where they had the hats and
Cowabunga Raph.
Yeah, that one.
Mm-hmm. They somehow jumped the gun on being able to have, we've got 4 main characters in the show, but we're going to re-release 7 or 8 versions of them every year.
I will say that they did that so Funkos could run. Because you look at a Funko Pop and how many different versions of there are of the same character.
Yeah.
So
and I've gone down the rabbit hole a few times because I made myself, when Funkos came out, I saw a problem that if I didn't cut myself off, that it was going to be a bad thing in life. So I limited myself to there's only 1 or 2 franchises of Funkos I'll actually get to collect because even that, like say the Avatar of the Last Airbender, that's my Funko go-to because I have all those. But the rabbit hole you go down to when you try and find all the variants of each one is unreal. Mm-hmm. And it literally is a stupid thing. Oh, but this one's got a hat. Oh, but this one has red eyes instead of green eyes. Like,
I don't know. I don't know if you can see. I have my Overwatch Funkos right there, and I went down the rabbit hole too of like, oh, cool. Like, there's this May. Oh, there's another version. Oh, there's like 2 other versions of May. She's wearing a pink outfit. Oh, okay. I need that one. Oh, look at this Lucy. And it's
a problem with that because in Overwatch, each one of those characters has probably 15 to 20 skins minimum each, plus all the special edition skins and everyone says, plus the different poses they can do. And like, it's unreal.
But I mean, that you look back at Ninja Turtles, and back then we're like, oh, this is ridiculous. But look at us now. So I would say that Transformers kind of dabbled with it a little bit. They more so got into it when like the early 2000s with different branding of it. But I think Ninja Turtles and Ghostbusters too, the real Ghostbusters, those kind of walked so Funko could run with different variants and stuff like that.
Yeah. We'll see if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Oh, so I just came across the Universal Monsters Ninja Turtles when they had Donatello, Dracula, Leo the Wolfman, Michelangelo, Frankenstein, and Raph as the Mummy.
They have those right now. They re-released them. If you go to Walmart, they're $30 and they're about this big.
La 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 la! Don't tell me. Those make great Halloween decorations, and I need some in the box too. Well, yeah. So that throwback. I mean, that those are a lot of the toys that were popular back in 1993, which to people, all right,
30 years ago.
Yeah, I remember walking through all these toys. But when I talk to people that are middle school, high school right now, those things are prehistory. That's like old time toys. Like, oh, really? Like they used to do that? Like.
You hurt my heart. My soul is crying right now.
I know it is, but
because like when it was even in radio. You and I would talk about the 80s and the 90s like it was just 10 years ago, and just this. I'm like, oh yeah, think about it, and then you actually do the math. You're like, 30 years ago. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look at radio stations that have things like 2K and beyond, all the hits from today, like. 2K and beyond. That's like, that is. That is quite a few years of music, isn't it?
Yeah.
Huh. I'm going to go cry a little now.
Welcome to Classic Oldies. Here's Nirvana. Smells like Teen Spirit.
Oh.
What?
Hey, a quick side note before we finish on that part. That part's getting me too because my little one will bring up songs and she's like, there's another version of this song. It'll be somebody covering something from like the 90s or something like that. And she'll think that they copied this version that somebody else did 2 years ago. I'm like, no.
Well, I mean, we kind of did that too in the 90s. There's a lot of artists that covered 80s and 70s songs. And our parents would be like, well, you know. But yeah, I understand that. I understand that big time.
Yeah. But let us know. Go to the comments at Get Geekish, run all those social media things. Throw on something. What was one of your favorite toys from 1993? Because there's got to be some other ones that will just spark those memories. You hear about them, and then I don't know if you're like me, but then it becomes 5 or 10 minutes of basking in the glory of that memory you had of that Nerf bow and arrow that you were trying to shoot in your backyard, and then just got lost in the tree, and then you cried relentlessly.
Is that a real story for you?
No.
That seemed awfully specific.
I'm not scarred at all. Not at all.
I wish that somebody would come up with a VR thing of KB toys just so I could walk down those aisles again.
Do you hear that, Google and ChatGPT?
Yep.
We need a metaverse of nostalgic toy stores just to go meander through.
And if you could make it smell the same too, that'd be great.
Gross. All right, well, I'm Beto, and for me and Derek, we'll talk at you soon. Hey, thanks for listening. We truly appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. Find us on social media at Get Geekish, and if you want more podcasts, we got plenty of them.